Hey, welcome to my channel. I'm Amber, and today I'm going to be sharing with you my wrap up for the last half of January. So this month I was supposed to read 9 books, and I ended up reading 10. In the first half of the month I read 5, and I did do a video talking about those books in detail and my thoughts on them. And right now I will just list them off real quickly to share with you what those are, and if you want to check them out and hear my thoughts on them, you can do that. So the first book was the 5th book in this book series that I shall not name, Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas, the first book in the Throne of Glass series, which I gave 3 stars to. Felix Ever After by Kay Stanley Callender, which I gave 5 stars to. The Guest List by Lucy Foley, which I gave 3 stars to. And the 5th book was Tagana by Guy Gabriel Kay, which I gave 5 stars to. So the first half of the month was really good reading wise, and then in the last half of the month I read 5 books, and out of those 5, 3 of them were bad, and it was like one right after the other. I just don't know what happened, but thankfully I didn't get into that pattern that I tend to when it comes to books I'm not enjoying, where I just end up getting into a reading slump, a reading slump, and I end up just not reading anymore after that. I just kind of like, it kills the reading joy, I guess. So I just am very glad that that didn't happen, because I did read 2 books that really made everything better for me. So the first book that I read in the latter half of the month was The Haunting of Bryn Wilder by Wendy Webb. This I thought was going to be like a horror mystery thriller book about Bryn Wilder, who had like a traumatic event happen, and she decides to escape her life for a while and goes to stay at this inn at Wharton, which is a small town by Lake Superior. And while she is staying at this inn, which used to be a boarding house, she starts having these visions or dreams and thinks that she's seeing like ghosts or and such. And then there is this mysterious man that has never been there before. A lot of the people who are at this inn were people that are regulars, and he was not, and nobody has ever heard about him before. So this book read like a Nicholas Sparks novel, and if you've read any of his works, you'll know what I'm talking about. But what I thought was going to be this ghostly, eerie, paranormal thriller or whatever book turned into an overridden, cheesy romance. I felt like not only did this book turn into a pure romance that did not make much sense to me, as these two people barely knew each other for like 5 seconds, and all of a sudden she's in love with this dude, and we don't even get to really know him at all. Like, I felt like she should have been suspicious by the fact that he wouldn't talk openly about what his job was or anything about himself personally, and yet she was just like always completely understanding about that, and was just like so in love with him, and they barely knew each other like a week, if even that. Hi. Nope. Okay. And the writing itself, like the dialogue was just so cheesy, and she was just hammering over the head about love. I don't even remember what the topic was, because I just totally blacked this book out, but in some ways, but like she was hammering you over the head with this idea about love. It was kind of like the love conquers all thing. But okay, well then don't. There she goes. uh and it just made everything about this book way more cheesy, and the dialogue just didn't feel natural or realistic. And then with everything that was happening, like, which was very interesting, like the reason why I finished this book was because the everything that was happening in the hotel and these visions that she was having was just really intriguing, and I really wanted to know more about it. But everything was happening so fast. This book is too short, and instead of really developing that out and really exploring it, she just keeps everything completely secret, and you don't know what these are about at all until the very end, where she completely dumps all the reveals and explanations at the very end of the book. And it was just all kind of like frustrating because I really think that there was potential to this story, but it all kind of just was wasted away. And like I said, with the romance, I couldn't connect or be invested in the relationship as they barely knew each other, and it was just instant love, and instant love in the worst way, in my opinion. And there's like a thing that happens at the towards the end of the book with the love interest that like because he was being questioned, have their suspicions around him, um, and all of a sudden this thing happens, and it felt like a bit of a cop out. Like the author didn't really want to deal with those questions, so all of a sudden this happened, which just came out of nowhere, and in kind of like where the story was, it just was like no. And it didn't have the emotional impact that I think that she was expecting it to have because again, we didn't know anything about this dude and there was just nothing there. Like, okay, like yeah, I feel bad that this happened, but at the same time, it just it rubbed me the wrong way. Like it was just really a really poor choice on the author's part for that to happen and just it didn't make any sense really why the author felt the need to do that. And you kind of get an idea of what that purpose was, but at the same time, again, it just doesn't make sense. Just trying to play with our emotions there a little bit. So yeah, and the writing felt like this made me feel like this was her first novel. It just read like a first time author, and surprisingly, this was not her first novel. She's written several books before this, which it just surprised me because like she would use like the same phrase every single page. Like in the first couple of chapters, she would be like she or someone else would be about to speak and then someone or something would interrupt them and it was just so repetitive. And then she also used the whole she let go of the breath that she didn't know she was holding. And again that became so repetitive. It was like every page for quite some time that she would use that same descriptive or however you would say that. And it was just again repetitive and it just got so annoying how she just felt like it felt like she just didn't know how to use something different to describe that situation. And also that whole thing is very YA type stuff. And again, it just this is why it made me feel like this was her first novel. Like it, I would have given her more of a benefit of doubt when it came to this if this was her first novel. But she's written several books before this one, so I don't know. Maybe this was just like one of those things, but yeah, I give this one 2 stars. The next book was Confessions of a Curious Bookseller by Elizabeth Green, which I DNF'd. This is about Fawn, who is a bookstore owner, and a cafe slash bookstore opens up in the neighborhood. And I think this is about how she starts to try to undermine the business, but she starts to get to know the guy maybe, or there's like a misunderstanding of some sorts and a romance starts to happen in the middle of all this. And yeah, like I wasn't expecting a lot out of this from the beginning because it's a romance and I'm not really a huge fan of romances, but at least I was like, at least this one you knew was gonna be a romance. And I was hoping for like a sweet cheesy romance, nothing like big deal about it. And instead, I got a character who was so unlikable, who was just selfish, self centered, and just a bit of a jerk. Like, she came off like a bad human in this book. The way that she treated her customers, the way that she treated the boyfriend that she was trying to break up with at the beginning of the book, I just could not with her. She was narcissistic and petty when it came to the breakup. Not narcissistic. Sorry. Passive aggressive and petty. The way that she just kind of like inserted this thing that bothered her, and then she tries to play it off like she's being really nice and how she's letting him go. I'm just like, you are being passive aggressive and petty, and you're surprised that he comes back at you in that way. Yeah. And then again, especially this, how she treats her customers. Um, I would not be surprised if she loses her business over the way that she treats her customers. They leave um reviews about her business, and these are like things that they are critiquing her about. These are things that I wouldn't be surprised if they're actually issues. Um, like one was saying like that they were searching for a book and they went into the section, couldn't find it, and they went searching throughout all the sections and it was in the wrong section. It was like a classic novel that was in the traveling section. And instead of taking that critique to heart and like actually like being like, yeah, I'll do better, and actually making sure that her employees and herself are making sure that the book system is easy for people to navigate. She lashes back out at the she lashes out back at the customer and makes it out like it's their fault. She blames the customer. She lashes out at them, and then she's surprised that these customers are saying that they'll find another business to um give the money to. It's like she's messy. She's not nice to her customers, and yet she wants to act like it's surprising to her that the other business is possibly going to get more people there. Uh, it's just I was planning to actually get to at least the part where she meets the business owner of the other bookstore, but the one thing that really bothered me the most, that one thing that kind of was like the straw that broke the camel's back, was the fact that when she was writing this email to her mom and trying to get her to come visit, she says that she can come visit because the cat was declawed. And I don't know if she declawed the cat herself or if this was a cat that she adopted that was declawed, but the way that she said it made me think that she condoned that behavior. And I don't know if the author does or not, but like, I just don't appreciate, I don't just appreciate it. I think that it is disgusting and just kind of immoral. Like, I just think like it's comparable to like cutting someone's fingers off. Cats depend on their claws, and it's like there are behavioral techniques to train your cat not to destroy furniture and clothing. It's like it's your responsibility to care for your cat and make sure that they're behaving in the way that you know, in a loving way. And instead you want to declaw your cat. Like, that is just, to me, it's messed up. And I just couldn't deal with that. And then lastly, this book is written in email slash diary format. Now, when it was in the diary part, it was a little bit better because I felt like I could hear her like actual voice coming through, but still wasn't enjoying her at all. And then in the email, it felt like with everybody that she talked to, including her sister and mom, it was like she was writing a business letter, which just made this whole book feel cold and distant. And again, this was not what I was wanting from this book. Like, I was expecting a cheesy romance, and that it should make you feel warm and not cold. And I shouldn't be put off by the main character at all. Like, I feel like I should be able to connect on some level. Like, I don't have to fully like you, but there has to be something that would make me want to read your story, especially since you're basically getting this through her correspondence. um I just was hoping for warmth, and instead I got a bit of a jerk bad human self-centered type of person. And mm, no. So it was a big old DNF for that one. And then the next book is Nickel and Dimed by Barbara Ehrenreich. On the back, it says that millions of Americans work full-time year-round for poverty-level wages. Barbara Ehrenreich decided to join them, inspired in part by the rhetoric surrounding welfare reform, which promised that any job equals a better life. But how can anyone survive, let alone prosper, on $6 to $7 an hour? To find out, Ehrenreich moved from Florida to Maine to Minnesota, taking the cheapest lodgings available, and decided to work as a waitress, hotel maid, house cleaner, nursing homemaid, and Walmart salesperson. Which I don't really agree about her taking the cheapest lodgings available. I don't think that at the beginning it felt more like she was staying in like medium to like well lodgings when it comes to the hotels that she would stay in. So there's that right off the bat. But I DNF'd this book. It was offensive. The way that she talked about these jobs and the people that she worked with was offensive. And I feel bad for anybody who may possibly have read this book and was one of those people that she was talking about, because she compared these jobs to prison camps, which I find disgusting. And she called people who lived in trailers trash. And then and she makes it very clear that she thinks that the only way that people could possibly be working a minimum wage job is if they are uneducated, and the only thing you could possibly get out of these jobs is the money, which you can barely survive on. uh, Again, offensive. And as somebody who works a minimum wage job, I took offense to this book. I think that her experiment of was inauthentic and inaccurate. She did not give you a full-fledged picture of things, because you're only getting this through her perspective, her experiences, which clearly wasn't fully an accurate experience, because she gave herself $1,000 to start off, which I don't know when this was, but I feel like that's a lot of money to have to start off. And she always felt, I always felt like she had one foot out the door. As soon as it was going to get too hard, she was going to give up, and you could very clearly tell that that was the case with her. And the way that she talked about people with children, it was like she was so horrified at the idea that these people would have families. uh it rubbed me the wrong way how she treated the whole situation when it came to people who had families. And she calls these jobs unattractive. I'm a janitor, so yeah, it's not the best. Sometimes it can be hard to have to clean the toilets and such, but I don't think that it's an unattractive job. My job makes it so that people can use the facilities, and you know, sit in the chairs and know that they're clean and sanitary and all these things. Like, I'm making something dirty, clean, and shiny again. How is that unattractive? You're demeaning teachers, um, grocery workers, waiters, etc. You're demeaning their work and their lives by saying that and comparing them to prison camps. Um, you're not only offending the workers, but you're offending the people who have actually experienced prison camps. And again, it would have been one thing if she not only shared her experiences, but like interviewed people after the fact, and actually, like, after she like finished her job and talked to these people, like did interviews with them and actually heard their side of the story, not just yours, which is, doesn't, it felt inauthentic and accurate. But we didn't really hear their experiences, and we only see their experiences through her eyes, which again, the way that she talks about these people, you're not getting a good representation of that. Um, and then in the introduction, she talks about the fact that she was surprised and a little offended by the fact that nobody could tell that she wasn't a minimum wage worker. Like, she just couldn't believe that people didn't know that she was an author. And I'm just like, again, like I've said, it makes me think that she believes that people who work minimum wage workers couldn't possibly be educated. And then also, it speaks loudly to how this experience really affected her by the fact that when she talks about coming out to her workers, that she was surprised by the fact that uh, that they were more worried about the fact that she wasn't going to be coming back and they would have to pick up the slack that she left. Like, seriously, dude. Um, it clearly shows that your experiences with these jobs did nothing to re- to change your viewpoint or to help you to understand anything at all. So, DNF'd. The last thing about this book that, the more that I think about it, the more problematic it is, and you know, um, is the fact that when she was talking about one of her coworkers, I think it was in a hotel. She was describing this person, and I don't think she ever really described anybody else. And this person is a person of color, and the only yeah, and like the only times I feel like she actually kind of goes into any kind of detail about the person is if they're a person of color, but I don't know if that's true really because those were the only two people. Um, but then she kind of like describes them a little bit negatively, and then when she's talking about how they act towards her, um, it's not a positive thing. And then she kind of goes in after saying, getting defensive and saying that she's not racist. And I'm like, well, if you feel the need to defend yourself and make a point about you not being racist, it makes me think that you are. So it just was like something that rubbed me the wrong way. And I'm more sensitive to these things right now. And I will always stay sensitive to it now, but like I'm more pointedly looking at these things because I was wondering about this, like because minimum wage jobs affects people of color in a different way than it would affect a person who is white. Uh, and she doesn't even go into that perspective, but of course we're only seeing this perspective through her eyes, and she's a white privileged woman. Um, so again, everything about this book made me angry and offended. And again, I just feel so sorry for the people who possibly read this book and actually worked with her because I would hate for that to affect them in any ways. Like, don't listen to her. I really wish there was other books that deal with this topic, but in more because I was expecting this to be like more of a research backed um, nonfiction talking about how really going into like why we need to raise minimum wage and making the workspace more um, better for the people who are working there. It's just that's what I was hoping for the discussion of those things, and instead, that's what I got. Uh, the results of this experiment that she had just went to show how self-centered and a self-centered narcissist that she is. So the next book was the second book in the Throne of Glass series called Crown of Midnight by Sarah J. Maas, and this one was so much better than the first book. The first book I felt was just complete fluff with a lack of plot and a lack of any real character development and a sole focus of the romance, the love triangle, really. And this one has so much more plot, so much more character development, and connections that were kind of there. Like there were some things in the first book that we actually kind of see the connections in this book, and it's like I love it. It's just a lot more exciting, a lot more thrilling, and we finally get to see why Selena, who is Ardalan's assassin, was so feared. We saw her in action, and I loved seeing that. And Dorian was much better in this book, and I felt like we actually got to see more of who he is as an actual person instead of somebody who was being like a playboy douchebag. He was just kind of because the first book it just felt like he was just playing games with Selena, and it was just like all about rebellion against his father. But now that like that now that part kind of like died it down, I felt like we got to see more of who he actually is, and there's like a mystery going around on with him, and it's just so much better with him in this book. Um, and Selena, like there's a lot more going on with her than we thought, and clearly we knew there was some kind of like mystery with her, but this book deals a lot more with it, and I'm so excited for what the next book is going to be. Um, but yes, a lot better with the writing, a lot better with the plot, and a lot better with character development. So this gets 4 stars. And the last book that I read this month was The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. And this is technically a standalone, but I just heard that she's possibly going to be working on a book or two that's going to be in the world, which makes me hopeful that maybe we'll get to see a sort of something that I really was sad that we didn't get to see played out in this one. It makes sense, and she left you with the idea that it was going to possibly happen, but like if she could be writing more in this world, I'm just kind of hoping that we'll see something with two specific people. Like, I really want to see that played out. But yes, I have a hard time explaining this, but it has dragons in it, which now I really just want to go searching out all the books that have dragons. I just want to read all the books that has dragons in it. But 1,000 years previous, about 1,000 years before the story it starts, the Nameless One and his following of dragons in the west, who are fire-breathing dragons, spread not only fire but plague, and because of that, it created the Grief of Ages. And then a comet fell from the sky, and the dragons and the Nameless One went to sleep. And there is a legend about what happened to take down the Nameless One then, but it's not fully clear as to what happened there. But something about the comet made the dragons go into a deep slumber. And now, as the 1,000 years approaches, the dragons and the Nameless One are starting to awaken. And we're seeing the perspective of the West, who holds all dragons, no matter where they're from or what kind they are, as evil and to be something to be afraid of. And we're also seeing perspectives from the East of the people who actually revere dragons, and the Eastern dragons are not fire breathing or plague breathing spreading dragons. They actually breathe wind, and they need to in order to survive, they need water. They have to be in water a lot of times. So we're seeing the perspective of Ede, who is a lady in waiting for Queen Sabran from the kingdom of Innis, and she's really there as a mage sent from the Pyre of the Orange Tree to protect Sabran. And you're seeing Loth, who is a part of the court that was sent there from like a different kingdom, and his adventures and experiences there. And then we are also seeing Tane, who is from the east, as a dragon rider, and also Nicholas, who was an alchemist that was banished to the east from Queen Sabran, or rather by Queen Sabran. And dragons, lore, political intrigue, it's all there. I love the fact that each of the characters' story helps to unfold the world, helps to build the world, and it's like there's a lot of layers to this, and it's just so wonderfully handled. And you just kind of have to go on the ride, enjoy the character stories, and as you enjoy the character stories, you see the world kind of spread out before you. And I love the fact that even like you're seeing perspectives from both sides, you're just so completely connected and invested in each of these people's lives and their outcomes of whatever they possibly are doing. And I was just so completely invested. It's so hard for me to talk about the books that I love, because especially when it comes to this much love, like it's been a very long time. It's been years since since I've read a book that has made me not want to stop, where I would just keep on reading. And I felt the drive to do that, and this book definitely did that for me. I just wanted to know what was going to happen. I was anxious for the characters, and these characters are just so fleshed out. They felt very real. They were imperfect, they made mistakes, and they were selfish, and sometimes they did things that made me lose respect. There is one character in this book that, although the author was able to make me feel sympathetic towards them in some ways, this person was like a gray character, and you clearly aren't kind of have like mixed feelings about them, and their motivations and everything was understandable, but at the same time I did lose respect for them once they did a certain thing. And it was just wonderful to see like these characters, and then as they kind of come together, like they cross paths, and seeing the other person through the eyes of the other person was like, because you're like oh my gosh, you're so scared of like how this is gonna play out, and I just loved everything about this book. The the fear of what was gonna happen to this world and to their homes was just so good. And the build up to it and the reveals of certain things that were, that were important. It's a great wild ride. And the romance between two of the characters was brilliant. I loved that romance, and it made me like I just connected it. And we don't get to see the love interest perspective, but seeing the getting to know that love interest through the eyes of the other person was just so wonderful, and it made me cry when certain things happened, and it was just this author knows how to write, and I am definitely going to be reading everything else that they have written because of this. Um, so so excited um, to see if she writes any more from this book. Also, what I loved is that there is LGBTQ representation, and what I loved especially was that the majority of the characters I felt, well, not felt, they were women and also people of color. It was really nice and wonderful to see a fantasy book with that kind of representation, which I do feel you don't see as often, especially in fantasy. So that was a really nice thing to see in this book. So absolutely, absolutely give it 5 stars. So that is all I have to talk about today when it comes to what I read. Um, I wanted to share what my favorites and least favorite book were for this month, and I could not decide what my between the 3 top rated books were to be my favorite, so I just chose to share all 3 of them. I will say that the Priory of the Orange Tree kind of itches Tagana out for first place with this. So it's Priory of the Orange Tree, Tagana, and then Felix Ever After. And then, of course, I think we all know what my least liked was, and that is Nickel and Dimed. So that is everything. I would love to hear what you've been reading. Have you read any of these books? What did you think of them? And until next time, thank you all so much for watching.